Hello, I'm Valerie Steele, Director and Chief Curator of the museum at MFIT, and I was invited to guest curate an exhibition at the Kobe Fashion Museum in Japan. A lifelong Francophile, I decided to have the first part of the Kobe Fashion Museum exhibition be about French fashion. The Kobe Fashion Museum has an amazing collection of 18th century French and English fashion, ranging from the robes à la française and à la anglaise to the empire dresses, beautiful accessories like shoes and fans, and a wealth of menswear so that we can see the transition from the colorful embroidered fashions to the plainer, darker clothes that represented what's been called the great masculine renunciation. In Japan, the image of rococo fashion, which seems so sweet and feminine, has inspired subcultural styles like the Lolita look. The second part of the exhibition looked at Chanel and her rivals, looking first at her primarily female competitors in the earlier part of the 20th century, and then in the second part at her primarily male competitors after World War II. Chanel's most famous, of course, for the little black dress, and the Kobe Fashion Museum has several beautiful examples, evening dresses and day suits from the 1920s and 30s. But Chanel was hardly the inventor of the little black dress. We see here beautiful examples by her contemporary Jean Lanvin, who made more romantic and feminine versions of the little black dress, and often with a sort of 18th century air, for example, with the slightly poofed skirt rather than the very straight androgynous lines that Chanel favored. The Callot sisters had begun earlier in the century, and they taught Madeleine Vionnet how to create the sort of body-worshipping fashions that she became famous for. Chanel's greatest rival during the 1930s, though, was Elsa Schiaparelli, the Italian-born fashion designer who regarded herself as an artist. She was famous for shocking pink and also the very broad and sculptured shoulders. Schiaparelli regarded herself as an artist, and here you can see the extraordinary embroidery and artistry that French couturiers had access to. After the war, fashion changed, turning away from the somewhat androgynous styles pioneered by Chanel to the lush femininity pioneered by Christian Dior. Dior's clothes, like this blue dress, looked back at the Belle Epoque and created a nostalgic, ultra-feminine look. Another famous post-war couturier was Pierre Balmain, who had worked together with Dior at the house of Lucien Lelong. When he started his own couture house in 1945, Pierre Balmain set out to make a new kind of post-war French couture. Chanel went back into business several years after the war had ended and created a new version of her famous suit. Chanel was often compared to a new generation of designers like Yves Saint Laurent and Courrèges, who had a very different image of femininity. Madame Grès was one of the few women designers who moved along with Chanel from the pre-war period into the post-war period. The third section of the exhibition looked at the contribution of Japanese kimono to the development of Western fashion. Here we see Paul Poiret on the right, kimono in the center, and on the left, a beautiful 1890s gown, which reveals so clearly the shift in silhouette from the corseted 19th century style to the high-waisted vertical look of Paul Poiret, very much inspired by the look of the kimono. Here you see Fortuny, another pioneering designer of the early 20th century who drew enormous inspiration from Japanese as well as ancient classical dress. The influence of Japanese fashion can also be seen in visual arts, including the imagery on fans. The last part of the exhibition focuses on the amazing collection of fashion photographs that belongs to the Kobe Fashion Museum. And it's interesting to compare, for example, the Horst photograph of the main-bâché corset in a 1939 Vogue with its appearance as a freestanding photograph on the wall. The photographs range from famous pieces by Avedon and Penn to those by Nick Knight and other great contemporary photographers. The exhibition ends with the work of 3 radical Japanese designers. From left to right, Yoji Yamamoto, Rei Kawakubo of Comme des Garçons, and Issey Miyake, who collectively revolutionized global fashion. It was a tremendous pleasure working with the staff of the Kobe Fashion Museum, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to at least an online version of my exhibition there. Thank you so much.